thank you for doing this, Carl.
My pleasure, Red, my pleasure. We're sorry we're not going to be would have been my first NimbleFingers, so I was excited about that.
That was my first question. I was wondering. I know that I've never been there when you guys had been there, but I was wondering whether you had been there before. I know Erin has years ago.
Erin has. She's always talked highly of it, and I was all revved up, and had to rev down, unfortunately.
Great, great. Well, I mean, the reason I wanted to do this, apart from the fact that I've admired your music for so long, is to let folks know what they missed this year and hopefully what they're gonna get a chance to experience next year. So I've got a bunch. If you see me looking over here, it's just because I got a bunch of questions that I sort of wrote down.
Okay, I may have some answers. I'll try.
I hope so. I'll start with an easy one. I was just going to start with where did you grow up?
Okay, well, I grew up predominantly in Georgia, but really in my early childhood, my father moved around. He had a job with the National Linen Service, which is, some people don't know what that would be nowadays, but they would launder, hospital linens, restaurant linens. It was all cloth back then.
Yeah.
And then have delivery trucks. And as I got older, of course, high school age, when I could drive a delivery truck, that was our summer job. All my three brothers and I, we would do that for summer job. Kind of hard work, but it was nice driving around Atlanta at that time.
Atlanta, yeah.
Which wasn't so bad way back then. Now it'd be a nightmare now, of course.
Right.
But so the first for 5 years, my father would work he was kind of the troubleshooter manager guy. They'd send him in to straight clean up. They're not being efficient in Louisville, Kentucky. That's when I was first born. He worked in Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh wow! So you did move around a lot.
And it'd be about 5 years, and then Columbus, Indiana, when I was really young,
yeah,
kindergarten age, and then Chattanooga, Tennessee. And finally, we got back to Decatur, Georgia, where I was, elementary school and getting on up. And Lithonia, Georgia, when I was high school, we moved out to the sticks back then. It was 20 miles out from Atlanta, which was sort of very rural back then.
Right.
Of course, it's been encroached by the metropolitan area now. But
you're almost like an army brat, but like a linen brat.
A linen brat, yeah. Well, we had nice napkins,
And what about your mom? What did she do?
Well, she was kind of a homemaker for the most part. She was very active, though, in the community, and she was kind of a real interesting lady. She's very short. She was about 4'6" or something, 4'7". It's very short, but kind of a fireball. You didn't want to cross her, She would keep us in line, with a look, and then maybe more than a look if she had to.
Right.
But she liked to play the piano. She was an influence on me because she loved country music, Hank Williams, and liked to bang on the piano. Kind of not a great technique, but she had a lot of enthusiasm when she played.
Right. Well, that was my next question. Was what was like the musical atmosphere? So I guess you're sort of answering that. Did your dad play at all?
As kind of a mystery. I wrote a song many years ago called "Get to Know Your Folks" as a result of me kind of not knowing. My father's father, who I'm named after, Carl Clifford Jones, he played music when he was young, apparently. I didn't discover this till after he had passed away from his wife, Christine, who my daughter's named after, Kelly Christine Jones. She was kind of in her late stages of life and was kind of, I think you get very lucid when you get close to death about early memories. And maybe some people have that lucidity. It hasn't been the case for me on a daily basis. Maybe I'm not wanting to rush into that. But she started talking about, just in her little easy chair in Macon, Georgia, about, Carl, he could play anything. I said, what'd you say? I didn't know he played any music at all. I said, he could play anything. I said, what are you talking about? I said, well, he had a little portable keyboard, and he courted me with a portable keyboard. I said, what? And then found out he could play any instrument, she said. And people would bring him odd instruments just to see if he could play them. So that was totally out of the blue for me. I was just freaked out. And he never said anything about music the whole time. He'd sit on the back porch when I was, growing up, when we visited Macon, Georgia. And he was kind of an industrious fellow early on. He would build boats, and he was very mechanically minded, good at taking things apart. And I didn't get that, unfortunately, too much either. But I guess I got to take apart pretty well. I couldn't put it back together very well.
Right.
But he didn't explain much about. He didn't ever say anything about music.
It's interesting how I think that's a common story here about people who later on realize you go back a generation and there was some sort of traditional music or just some sort of homemade music in the family that they didn't know about.
Well, there was a story. I mean, I've always been perplexed because I wonder what was that story that he just totally didn't ever even mention, or he didn't want to mention it. Who knows? I have no clue. But and my father never played music as far as I know. But one day, I mean, he always, as I was growing up, he was kind of perplexed by me. You know, said, "Oh man, he'd say, what are you going to do for a career?" You know, he'd kind of ask me that. You know, and I would say, well, I'm not sure right now, but I did go to like Georgia Tech and architectural school for a year. That was strife inducing for me. That didn't pan out, I might say.
Right.
But anyway, he came by one time. I was playing the guitar, and he picked up my guitar, and he just did this to, I think, sort of say, you know, I sort of know. He played about 3 chords on the guitar out of the blue, just junk, 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 and put it down. Again, I never heard nothing about music,
so weird.
So it's a strange. I'll make up a song besides Get to Know Your Folks sometime, and maybe have to just a hypothesis about what was the story, because there's no telling.
Mm-hmm.
You know. But anyway, that was an interesting thing. But my mother was the supportive force. You know, she loved. She had a grandfather that she would tap the straws on the porch for fiddle, that played the fiddle.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And she loved, you know, like I say, she'd dance around when the country music station played, so she was very enthusiastic about my playing. So that
so she was supportive of your playing.
Yeah, she was the one that really kind of kept, you know, just encouraged me, and you know, would and again, she would play. I'd play along with her piano playing. We'd do "You're Cheating Hard," or she loved "Beautiful Dreamer," you know, Stephen Foster songs and whatever. You know, whenever she was going to sit down, say, "Get your guitar, Carl. Get over here. Let's try something." You know, so
guitar was your first instrument?
Started at 10 years old, and I had a good buddy, a guy named Charles Bryant, who was my first, gave me a few lessons. And he had an ulterior motive because he had a kind of a church choir. He was like a choir director. And this was back in the day when they were really starting to try to get music into the churches. This was like a Baptist church. My mother was always an addict. She'd go to Baptist church all the time, and she'd, you know, drag me along. I mean, I started going a little bit, but I wasn't. My father kind of stayed home, and that was his day off to just chill out. You know, he worked really early, you know, long hours every week as the plant manager. Anyway, Charlie needed a guitar player for his musicals, basically. You know, because he was doing all these kind of complex music. I mean, for me, it was very complex looking back on those days. They had these, you know, not rock operas, but sort of like a rock opera kind of thing. Okay. And the chords would be, you know, F sharp minors, and, you know, I mean, a lot of bar chords, and I couldn't even play, you know, G, C, and D hardly at the time. I was just starting to take lessons. So he was training me up, unbeknownst to me, to be his guitarist for the musicals in his church.
Sneaky. Did he get you reading music right off the bat, or did your mom she already taught you that maybe?
Well, I was kind of into that on my own. I had like Alfred Knowles, you know, little books, you know, little volume 1, volume 2, and I was trying to figure out the dots right off the bat, because it was just amazing to me that you could look at dots and play. You know, I thought it was going to improve my playing. It was a slow process. But the musicals were good for me because I had to learn all these hard chords, and also, of course, playing as an ensemble was a real art, you know, right off the bat.
Absolutely. And were you playing rock and roll or folk music? What were you listening to in your own time?
Well, I mean, I was right in. You know, I was born in '54, so it was '64, and I was listening to, of course, the Bob Dylan and the Beatles, and, you know, folk, Peter, Paul, and Mary. See, another thing that influenced was my teacher there, Charles. He was into Gordon Lightfoot and Peter, Paul, and Mary. So he had me finger picking, you know, some, you know, Puff the Magic Dragon, you know, the hits, Blowing in the Wind, maybe the Peter, Paul, and Mary version. But I got a harmonica rack and tried to play like Bob Dylan. Like, I don't know if you ever did that, but
yeah, a little bit.
You know, we can't hide that fact. What can you do? Oh, there we go. Yeah. So I still, and Bob Dylan, you know, it's funny when you see harmonica method books, you know, Bob Dylan harmonica method books.
Yeah, interesting.
You go, well, I don't know about that, but
so was that music sort of your gateway to traditional music?
Yes, yeah, it was, and finger picking. See, I didn't finger pick. I mean, I finger picked. I never used a flat pick until I went to college, which is totally weird to think about. But I played all this folk music finger picked, and I went to my first when I went to college at University of North Alabama. They had, that's right close to the Athens Fiddlers Convention, which is a huge, been going on for 75 or more years, I think now. And they would have people like Mike Seeger, and there was a really good, I don't know if you ever heard of this banjo player, a guy named David Molk, M-O-L-K.
I have not, no.
He was like a wizard. He was like a real, he was one of the first guys I ever saw drink Perrier water.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
To give you a clue, that's like very bohemian in the day, you know. I mean,
right.
Wow, and he'd sit cross-legged, and he could play English flute, and he could do, he could also play harmonic and fiddle and sound like the old 78s. He could do both parts, you know, harmonies, and it was unbelievable. He was really amazing. But I mean, way out of my knowledge zone. I had no clue about Perrier or, English flute or anyway. He was very intriguing to me because he was such a good clawhammer banjo player. Really legendary player. I don't think hardly anybody knows about him.
I've never heard the name.
Okay, MOLK. Well, it'd be worth doing a search because if he's still playing, he was monumental back then, And but that's where I first saw, like say, Mike Seeger, and there would be bluegrass people there at that festival, like Dan Crary, Byron Berline might show up. It's like a legendary festival that had like early on Arthur Smith and people would be there. And
wow.
James Bryan tells a story about Arthur Smith in the fiddle competition, who wrote Blackberry Blossom, I think it is, and they wouldn't let him play his own tunes because it gave him an unfair advantage at the festival. And people would be up there playing all his tunes, Blackberry Blossom, and he'd get up there and, oh, you can't play that, sir. I'm sorry, that's your tune, So
right.
Just when James, was there when that happened, apparently. So that's life is
cool.
odd.
Very cool. Sorry, I've got a flag.
Oh, that's okay.
Around me here.
No worries.
I know that after, well, I guess it sounds like maybe it was after your 1 year at university. Did you study sound recording?
No, I should have. No, what happened there, really, when I went to Georgia Tech for about 1 year, maybe a year and a half, I kind of backed up and went to a junior college for a couple of years in Decatur, Georgia, which is nice, a little DeKalb County junior college, and had a real good influence there, a guy named Mo Turrentine, who was a short little fella, and he was a band director, originally really popular band director at Southwest DeKalb High School, I think it was. I mean, he was like a god almost in that world, the band directors. He had great bands, they won competitions, but he kind of settled down and taught music in this little junior college. So he was a real character. And so I learned theory. I took a couple of years of theory and just kind of general stuff, and really, and then after that, it's kind of a strange story. I went to a regular college in, University of North Alabama, and took 4 more years of college. I was just becoming a, career college guy.
Yeah.
And I repeated some of the same classes with a different teacher, and so that was interesting. So I got a lot of theory pounded into me somewhat, but it was old, like Walter Piston, really old books that my teacher in the 4-year university was, what was his name? I can't remember his name right now, but he always would play the old music appreciation, the records, and he would just kind of swoon for these old recordings. I mean, he'd just be literally swooning. And he'd get you he'd repeat some facts saying, do you savvy, class? Savvy was his word. Do you savvy? But anyway, he was a good influence too. So I was in a little collegiate choir there as a requirement I was going to be a music teacher at one point. Music education was my start.
Okay.
But then I shifted. Here's what was a big shift. I shifted. They had one reason I went to that college was they had a commercial. They had a guitar program, first of all. You can major in guitar, even though it was classical. And I got into that, and I realized it was too disciplined, and I could hear my ankle crack for the recital. Walking up and it's so quiet, and you have judges, and what a different world. It wasn't my world. I knew I was getting almost get chills just reliving that thought. But anyway, I realized that wasn't for me, and they started a commercial music program right there. They're right there, based out of it was Florence, Alabama, but Muscle Shoals, Alabama's right there. They had all these studios, Fame Studios and Muscle Shoals Sound, and all these, everybody in the world recording there. So it was affiliated with all these. They bring people, producers, and so I got to really start hanging out in the studios and become a commercial music major.
So were you like an intern, sort of?
Part of that, I mean, you could kind of focus, like some of the guys went into engineering. They'd actually be assistant engineers at Fame Studio and stuff. I never did the engineering much I just kind of hung out more. I kind of hung out with the songwriters.
That's cool. What are there any sessions that you got to watch or people that you...
Yeah. Well, one of the most memorable was Roy Orbison.
Oh, wow. And
he was like doing a comeback. He had open heart surgery. And he had come back. This was going to be his first record after after he'd recuperated. And I never forget, it was in Wishbone Studios. There's a guy named Terry Woodford, a pretty cool guy. And his cohort, his buddy in the studio was a guy named Clayton Ivey. And he's on some of those a lot of Fame Studio stuff. He was in part of that team. And a very, very hip cat. I mean, he was very cool, great keyboard. But he played that Fender Rhodes Electric all the time on everything back then, right?
Cool.
Which is a good sound, but he loved bluegrass. He'd hang out in the clubs and loved bluegrass music. Pretty funny. Anyway, Roy Orbison's in there, and he's in the little, they'd already got the tracks recorded. Had a great band in there. And anyway, he's in the thing singing there, and they're in there saying, I don't think he's got it. He was doing a song called Poor Baby. And you can get this record now. It wasn't one of his big hits, but it's just this track is worth checking out. It's called Laminar Flow was the name of the album. That hurt it a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
and he's wearing kind of a very scary leather, doesn't cover him up as good as it should have. It's a little, anyway. Check out Laminar Flow. But anyway, he's in there singing and just not the high notes aren't. He's got to ooh, poor baby. It goes up really high and that stuff, and it's just not sounding like Roy, right? And they say, I don't think he's got it. And so they took a lunch break, and they came back in there, and he goes back in there with that song, Poor Baby, and it's like he's back. It was I'm getting chills just thinking about it. It's like his voice came back in that song, Poor Baby.
What did he have for lunch?
That's a good question. I don't know. Maybe that's a very good question. There was a little place there called El Biscuit Village. Maybe he went there. I don't know what they would have had. But anyway, that song, Poor Baby on Laminar Flow would be something to check out.
Did any of that, your experiences with that, did it affect the way you approach your own recording over the years, or have done that? Anything that you sort of took note of that you've maybe incorporated into the way you like to record music?
Well, I wish I could say I learned a lot of the recording in there. I mean, I was around it a bunch, a massive amount of times with really good engineers and stuff. But I was more focused, like I say, on the songwriting and the music part of it. I really soaked up the songwriter stuff more, I think. But I think I did get a lot of patience as far as trying to get a good sound, because I think people often rush into, those guys were good at mic placement. They had done it a lot, but they took time setting the setup, right? So I think I learned that, don't rush in and say, yeah, that's good. Oh, that's a pretty good sound. Yeah, let's do it. And that's another way to approach it. You go for the people's ready to play. Don't hold them back. Let them do. They're ready to. They got it ready. Capture it. So that's another.
That's how I would have imagined those studios would have worked, because the vision that I have of them is so many bands and sessions coming through that they would have had to learn to be really quick about it and capture the. Capture the moment, and not sort of, because that can happen when you're in the studio. If somebody's moving them, testing mics, and it's really easy to miss them.
That's true. Well, they're definitely. I saw that too in a lot of different studios, and it was pretty relaxed. I mean, those guys were pretty relaxed. They would and they'd go all night. They'd start early, and they'd have some engineer come in. It was kind of the daytime engineer, and then they'd have the night guy who was never saw the light of day kind of guy. Right? He's in there. Right. So and that's still pretty typical for studios. It's changed a lot now, but I got to see some be like Steve Goodman would come through, and Eddie Rabbitt, just songwriters of the day having hit records.
Right.
And that was pretty cool. And Mac McAnally he started his career. He plays with Jimmy Buffett now. And I remember his first session he came in. There was a buddy named Donnie Lowry, and he had hired Mac to come from Belmont, Mississippi. And Mac had dropped out of school at the 10th grade and just hung out on the gossip bench, he said, in Mississippi. But a great guitar player, really. Anyway, he was playing on those little demo sessions for Donnie. These guys, who is this guy? He's really good. And he got a record contract for like $75,000 contract, his first record.
Amazing.
And it's an amazing song, but overproduced. Some of that stuff, just you hear the original. Like Mac, just with a guitar playing song, was just amazing. And then you get the album; it's got strings, and it's like gone. They just and a lot of that I learned. Was that they would just have an orchestra hired for the weekend, and they did the thing so quick. He said, we got these guys for another hour. What can we put them on?
Throw them on something else at the
because they booked the time. They weren't going to waste the time.
Absolutely.
What about Mac's record? Pull it out. Let's put it on. Yeah, put it on this. So cool. Silly stuff, and that happened a lot.
So what age are you at this point?
Well, let's see. I guess that would have been. Let me think. I graduated high school in '72, so kind of late '70s and getting on into the '80s.
Okay, and so what are you doing musically at this time? Had you started playing mandolin or banjo?
I did. At college, when I went to the University of North Alabama, I started playing mandolin with this bluegrass band that was at a little orientation. A guy named Scooter Muse was the banjo player, and their mandolin player was quitting the job. That orientation was his last gig, and I bought a little junker mandolin on the way. I always tell the story, but a place called Joe C. Sapp's Furniture Supply. He was in Coleman, Alabama. He had a little shop that had anything and everything. He'd trade for stuff, right? He'd trade a pair of overalls for a bass bow, stuff like that. Where'd you get that bow, Joe? He said, I need some overalls. I traded for that. And said, well, that's a nice bow, but I don't have a bass. But he had a little mandolin, an Alex mandolin, highly sought after to this day. I bought for $50, and course, when you're youth and ignorance is bliss is very true, because I had no clue it was just a really terrible mandolin. I didn't know any better. So I was playing in this bluegrass band and didn't even know how to play chords or anything, and doing gigs. If I had a video of that, it would be it'd be a good comedy, I'm sure, because I really knew nothing about the mandolin. I didn't play fiddle at the time.
Right. So guitar, mandolin, and did you eventually meet somebody who was an actual mandolin player that you sort of glommed onto, or?
Well, I mean, I started going to fiddlers conventions through Scooter right there in college, and also go to that Athens festival. You know, I started trying to use a flat pick because I see Dan Crary there. Says, "Boy, he sounds good with that pick." Mm-hmm. But I was doing sort of the strangest, and even on the banjo, I'd had a banjo, but I was trying to do. I guess Peter, Paul, and Mary plays Foggy Mountain Breakdown on the banjo, and you talk about the worst sound ever. You know, that was really bad.
Yeah.
Or almost a Travis picking banjo. I mean, it just didn't work for a fast Foggy Mountain Breakdown.
Right.
And
you still do a lot of finger picking, like even with backing up fiddle music sometimes, don't you?
Yeah, I love finger picking, and I think it's just a little gentler backup, or I think you can control the rhythm. I can anyway. I've done that longer, so I think I have a little more control over syncopation and things, maybe. Yeah. But a pick can just about, as Tony Rice proved, a pick can do just about anything finger pickers can do.
Yeah.
So, but I still love finger picking. But I think my whole approach to just learning instruments really has been just try to learn the instrument well and be able to do as much as you can, be able to fit into anything with time, jazz or, of course, I really appreciate the jazz players because they have such knowledge of the instrument. Somebody like a young player like Grant Gordy, those guys they can just assimilate any, being the side guy, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I love that. And I've done some of that through the years, like songwriters like Kate Campbell's a really good songwriter out of Tennessee and Mississippi originally. And she was at a lot of camps I was at, and she would have me be like the noodle guy, playing the mandolin. So stuff like that really got me to try to learn how to navigate, my way around it better.
Speaking of being a sideman, how did you hook up with Norman and Nancy Blake and James Bryan? Did you know James first or Norman or?
I got to know James. There was a big festival in Alabama, in Steele, Alabama, called Horsepins 40. Really huge festival, and this guy was kind of eccentric. The mascot was a groundhog, and they had these huge festivals. But it was they'd have like the top bluegrass, Bill Monroe. They'd have Del McCrory, and they'd have like the Plank Road String Band, the Highwood String Band, a real mishmash, and the singer-songwriter guys. All in this big festival for a weekend, and just a huge crowds, of course. It was like just the big festivals of the day. And so I started going to that and hearing, of course, Bill Monroe play the mandolin was pretty cool. I didn't mind that a bit. But meeting a lot of good fiddlers, and especially, I guess my, big epiphany there was hearing Norman and Nancy with James. When I heard them for the first time, I just loved James's fiddling so much. First of all, I just couldn't believe how nice he made that fiddle sound. And he was a big part of their sound, the Rising Fawn String Ensemble, they call themselves. But they just had such a nice, relaxed, even though they'd play some stuff fast, and it was deceptive. When you have a really good fiddler like James, he's playing pretty fast. You don't even realize it. It sounds so effortless and mastery of any instrument, I think. They make it a lot relaxed and slow. It's not slow, really, but it sounds slow.
Sure. Yeah.
And then you try to play it and say, man, he's moving out.
Settled.
Yeah, just perfect effortless efficiency. They're very efficient. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I heard them and just started kind of after the concert, one of those festivals, I went up and just started trying to ask James about what was the name of that third tune you played. Where'd you learn that? Just starting to bug him basically, right? And then I'd record a lot of stuff on an old little realistic stereo recorder, probably the worst one they ever made, but it's heavy, and I carried that thing around and record all kind of stuff.
Like live shows.
Yeah, just with cassettes, the cheapest cassettes I could buy. I had a high quality. I aim for the lowest quality, I guess, but I just couldn't afford it. I was just buying cheap. I just didn't have much money to buy.
Sure. So did you learn their repertoire for some?
I would start learning the tunes from James, and then I'd come back the next year and I'd be a little bit better and say, yeah, James, I kind of, they'd sit around playing. James was nice enough. I pestered him enough where he finally just said, he's not going to leave me alone. I guess I'm going to have to let him in and see what happens,
Yeah.
Open the door. But often that's the case. I think people get enamored and they just study this materials like Mike Marshall and David Grisman, just kind of learn everything those guys did. I didn't do that as much. I did learn a lot of the tunes and loved them. And I think he could tell I just really loved the old time tunes and the way he played them. So I'd learned some harmonies and eventually ended up playing with Norman, Nancy, and James, in 1980 for about a year, traveling.
Okay.
So that was very fun.
Guys were touring?
Toured, and I played the mandolin, though. So, and good influence on the mandolin. Of course, Norman's a great mandolin player, and he played some mandolin back then, and I really loved his mandolin playing. And people like, let's see, Red Rector, kind of did some records with Norman. And of course, Jethro Burns, I love his. I mean, I cannot emulate his playing, but I love his technique and ability. He's amazing in improvising.
Were you on the Underground Music, the Mysterious South album? Was that? Yeah,
I got to be on that record there. It was supposed to be one of Norman and Nancy's. It was featuring their original mandolin tunes. Because Nancy plays the mandolin as well.
Of course.
But it ended up being kind of Norman didn't play any mandolin on the record except for one tune, which is kind of weird. We thought he was going to play a lot of mandolin, and James was actually ill, so he couldn't do that record. And they got Peter Ostrushko to come in and do and learn the parts for the mandolin. So Peter played most of the lead mandolin. And one track, I think, the Natasha's Waltz, which is a beautiful piece. Norman and Nancy and Peter are doing tremolo mandolin, it's a frenzy, and Norman. The way Norman would operate, he'd tell you to you'd sit in a circle and run through the tune right before you're going to record, and he would go around. It'd be maybe 5 or 6 people in a circle, and he'd go around and say, "Now, what are you doing on that?" And he said, "I don't think so." He'd send you out on that one. And if you're sitting in that circle, he's coming around you, and I've got a mandola or something which he'd given me just to play for the session. I didn't know how to play the mandola. I was having to kind of hunt and peck on that. But I tried to say, okay, I'll try a little harmony. He said, okay, yeah, we'll try that, So I snuck in with about 9 tracks, but it was kind of a stressful thing.
It was, yeah. And what was it live off the floor pretty much, or were there
yeah. Live recording. And the thing was challenging too, that Natasha's Waltz, he came out to me and said, I still have a little Vega archtop from the 40s, real nice sounding little guitar. He said, I think I want you to play guitar on that and maybe do a little intro. And I'm going, and he said, you got about a half hour to work it out. I go, oh my God. But it turned out pretty good. I think my time is a little sketchy on that track, but still it's a beautiful track. And
that's a beautiful intro. I know the one you're talking about. That's no time to overthink it anyways, right?
No. But and he used it, which was great. But the thing was so funny, I was playing that and they're sitting in this, we're all sitting pretty close together, and those mandolins are just tremolo frenzy, and I'm doing this kind of slow. So it was kind of hard not to, hard to keep my timing.
Yeah, settle in on something.
I was feeling their tremolo breeze, I was like, whoa, they're in a frenzy, and I'm trying to stay calm here. So I was trying to go to the islands.
Yeah. Were you guys, in that year you played with them, were you on the road a lot? Was that your first taste of touring?
That was the first time I'd really toured extensively. Yeah, they would go for maybe 2-3 weeks at a time, and I'd kind of meet up with them. It was kind of my first wife was a grad student at the University of North Carolina. So she had a stipend and stuff. So I wasn't, making a lot of money on the road with playing music, but I was enjoying it. But when her stipend ran out, that's when I had to quit touring. Right. Because that's just the way it was. But it was wonderful music, and I didn't even have at that time, I didn't even have a working recorder. I regret that I didn't have a bunch of tapes. I just kind of sitting around. We played a lot of great music, just sitting around on the bus or, at campgrounds or wherever we were. Mm-hmm. But, it's all in my head, and I did tape a lot of stuff with James and I later, which is great. Just, again, I didn't label tapes so well, so, I have a high caliber of folkloredom.
Speaking of folkloredom, this is a little odd. This is a bit banjo-centric, but there's a fella named Tom Jackson who plays on some of those albums.
Sure, oh yeah, Tom's one of the greats. Well, Tom's... he plays a 6-string, or did. He kind of quit playing the banjo many years ago, but he and James still some of the best fiddle banjo music I've ever heard.
Me too, but you don't hear about him at all, really.
Well, I think he kind of quit playing years ago. Tom's a big influence on me because he was one of those guys that would have an idea, whatever. I mean, a notion, so to speak. Said, "I'm gonna learn to carve tombstones." Next thing you know, he's carving tombstones. He's just one of those guys that he had no breaks. When he had an idea, he just was doing it the next thing. So that was pretty impressive.
So you said did he almost always play a 6-string banjo?
No, he played a 5-string early on. He had a little Wonder 5-string, with a little moon. Or Cole's Eclipse is when he played. I love that little. He had I always told him he'd sell me that when he ever sold it, but I think he sold it out from under me one time. But
too bad.
But then he had. I do have a 6-string that he had made by a guy named Marion Kirk. That's
interesting.
got a rooster head on it that he had designed and built, and then he got it and didn't like it, and so I bought it from him because he was just.
Oh, so you have.
I have that. I'll show that to you. Let me grab that. That'd be kind of. It needs some attention.
I'll grab my 6 string. It's right behind me.
Yeah. Cool. Mine is mine. This one needs some attention. I feel bad that this will get me back. We can see the. I can get.
Oh wow! Oh my God, that's amazing.
It's a pretty cool. It's based on a ceramic plate. Amazing. But I need to get. It actually is a. It's a little wonder pot.
Okay.
But I need some attention. I think the neck needs a little resetting and stuff. So I want to get it back in action. I hadn't played it in a while because it's been in pretty bad shape. Just neck wise and it's got cob. We've been hanging up just to look at more. So I apologize to Marion Kirk and Tom Jackson, but I'll get it back in action.
I got this last year in England. It was originally a 7-string banjo. It's from the 1890s.
Right.
And a fellow I bought it off of had changed it to a 6-string. Sorry, it was originally a 7-string, changed to a 6-string. So it's got nylon strings on it. It's Brazilian rosewood neck. It's just a beautiful piece.
Oh my goodness, very nice.
It plays great. I changed out the tuners and I had it scooped here. But I'm really digging it. It's like I've just had a breakthrough a few weeks ago just with the understanding the way the bass string works and the tuning.
Oh yeah.
That really made a big difference. I won't get into it here. We can talk about it another time. But
that's good.
I'm really digging it. It's interesting to hear that fellow Tom. Did he play one of those on some of those recordings?
Oh yeah, he played 6-string a lot. He would always have a kind of a mosaic on the head. He would do some artwork, but he would also he had a couple of Scruggs tuners he'd put on there. So because a lot of tunes, James, they might do a medley where he'd go from F to B flat or something.
Oh wow!
And he would just crank his Scruggs tuners. He'd have them set.
Huh.
So that worked pretty good too. And of course, a lot of people put fine tuners down here, I guess, on the banjos and things.
Yeah, I got these. I got these. The Bill Rickard.
Nice.
Geared ones. So they've got. I think it's a 10 or 12 to 1 ratio.
Right.
Even though they look like normal banjo tuners, because I use on my playing banjo, I've always used electric guitar tuners on it.
Okay.
For the gear ratio.
So I need to. I might try to get some different tuners for this. I got to get it just playable because it's got really high action right now. So I need to just kind of mess with the neck or something, or take it to some. I know, of course, I got people like Adam Hurt around here. They know all the banjo tricks. I might get him to.
Well, I've been trying to convince Adam to get one of these because I as from when I've been playing with it the last month or two, sort of getting more into it. I just keep thinking that it would just be perfect for him.
Oh yeah, well, keep after him. I'll mention it too. We'll hit him from both sides and see.
Yeah, okay.
He would do good, but 6 strings are great. Like say you have the low note of the fiddle, so that's what attracted me.
Yeah.
When the fiddle goes to that low G and you're in a G tuning, you got a D.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it was always aggravating, and then Tom said, "Yeah, that's why I started playing the 6 string because he can go all the way down. The fiddle cannot escape."
Yeah.
Kind of approach, which I think it does make sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm starting to now that I'm getting more comfortable on this, I'm toying with the idea of getting one made that's a little bit more, because this one's so old and it's got nylon strings on it, but getting sort of more of a workaday version of it. Because why wouldn't you want the extra string? It doesn't really affect anything. It just makes everything better. And you don't have to. You leave it in the same note for both the tunings that you tend to play out of anyway. So it's not adding any more tuning actually.
I agree. Yeah, I'm on the same page. Well, Rickard might make. Does he make? He doesn't make a 6 string, does he? You might be able to get him to do that.
Probably could convince him to.
That might be a nice thing to do. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure they have to look at the market. Say, well, that's not going to be a hot seller, but. It might be in the future, but it's I think a really good. But Tom, like I say, Tom and James were, and the thing about any musicians, they have ups and downs. Tom and James would have their little, because one thing about Tom, and this is not a bad thing, but he would get enamored from different ladies. This is a long time ago, and he would kind of just go off, off track, he'd be gone, say, where'd Tom? Oh, I think he found another lady. He lives in so-and-so. He might've gone to visit her or whatever. So. Right. He was always a free spirit, you might say, but a great inspiration to me because he got me playing clawhammer banjo, really. So I should say that. And I was in college there, and his uncle was in the University of North Alabama, Bill Foster, who's a bluegrass player. He and his brother played the Foster brothers. They do the Dreadful Snake and all the classics, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but Bill also played clawhammer, and Tom would always come visit him, and I saw Tom a lot there. Started to go to the Horse Pens 40 Festival. and started playing the claw because I was trying to do finger picking, playing I could figure out bluegrass banjo licks for Scooter because he was learning. We were learning like Foggy Mountain Breakdown the way Carl Jackson did, just a E minor.
Right.
So all those little licks. I would learn the chromatic licks, melodic banjo they'd call it, I guess. Bill Keith and all that. I didn't really work on playing them fast, but I could teach him to Scooter, and he'd learn them, and we'd do those. We'd put all the. But I played the mandolin. Our bluegrass band I played in there was called the Mud Road String Band. They had that name before me. Thank goodness. I had no control over the name, but the nice thing about playing in that band, we didn't really have a fiddle. I started trying to play fiddle later, but we had a really banjo mandolin centric sound. We did a lot of harmony, banjo and mandolin stuff, licks for arranging, which I thought was pretty nice. We did one record, and it was pretty fun. But it really got me going. Scooter knew all the old music of the bluegrass guys. Some of those, that whole world, as you know, they know, when so and so started using a different string, or he changed his thumb pick, or he had an ingrown toenail back in 1958, and that threw him off, on that one recording.
Right.
They know all the specifics about their heroes.
Right.
And Eddie Aycock was at the Athens Festival last year, who's a famous, bluegrass guy, him and Martha. And I remember seeing them, some of these festivals back in the day, Labor Day weekend in Memphis, Tennessee. I never will forget. A long time ago now, there was a couple of brothers named the Morton twins. They're still around, and they emulated, anybody and everybody. They would get their hair done like their latest favorite banjo player or whatever. But anyway, they had Ike and Tina Turner, the Newgrass Revival, the Dillards. They had like anybody and everything, but the strangest combination of people at these huge weekends.
Yeah,
so I remember watching Ike and Tina Turner review with Sam Bush standing beside me, in Memphis, Tennessee, years ago.
That is an odd combination.
Yeah.
So did you and James keep in touch then? Because it was a big jump from when you were playing with him in Rising Fun to when you guys did your first album, which I think was in the late 90s, or?
The first album was 95. We did Two Pictures, which is, I like to think, a classic in a good way.
Yeah, no, it is, for sure.
But what happened, actually, let's see, how did that kind of come down? I would always see James and Norman, those folks at the festivals and on a yearly basis, several, different festivals maybe during the year. And I actually ended up moving over to near where James and his wife Patty lived. They were in a little town called Flat Rock. And I was trying to move over there. I played in that one bluegrass band for a long time, and I was actually just kind of looking for a change, and moved over to close to Chattanooga, but in Alabama. There was a guy named Roy Curry, who's a real good flat pick guitar player, and we were going to start a little band. I was just going to do a different band and move across the state, sort of thing, and get over there. That just kind of just fell through. But I was over there with all my stuff and lived in a little house. James and Patty helped me find a little house to rent, and I was actually kind of starting to write out music for Norman and them a little bit. But what really happened is I
transcribe a
little bit of stuff. I didn't do a lot, but I was doing that a little bit. And what happened is I lived there for about a year, and I just did odd jobs, struggling to survive. And I was doing, the kind of job I had was like going in, they'd lock a janitorial crew in the mall for overnight to strip all the floors. Lovely work, with acid and stuff. Right. And they would lock you in so you couldn't steal anything.
Oh my God.
Then you get out. So I did that kind of stuff. But after I moved back across the state, I actually moved back across the state and got married. My first time I got married in 82. But then Norman and Nancy asked me to play in their band after I left, moved, which is not as convenient, of course, right? That's the way life is. But I on behalf of my first wife, ex-wife now, she did encourage me to play. Said, you'll regret, if you don't do that, you'll regret that, I think.
That's good.
And so I did tour with them for a year, and it was an amazing experience, and got to do the mandolin record. And yeah, never forget, we got to play a lot of the festivals, and get to know people like Sam Bush. Just that was the big benefit, get to know all these great musicians and hang out with them, because they were big fans of Norman, right?
That's one of the gifts of this type of music, is you get into it, and if you stick with it, you're going to meet all your heroes.
I know.
At some point,
they're fairly approachable. Yeah, they're fairly approachable, and a lot more so than a lot, like the big commercial successful music, So I got to meet a lot of my favorite. Sam Bush and Buck White is one of my favorite mandolin players. He was a great player and very nice to me. He let me play his mandolin and kind of encourage me, and that's wonderful. And he was one of those guys that could do anything. Great piano player. And his daughters, great.
I saw him with Ry Cooter and Ricky Skaggs a couple years ago in Toronto.
Oh, my goodness.
He's suffering from Alzheimer's, but he could still play, man, could he play the piano. I mean, it really, like, there were so many great players up there on stage, but when he really got going, it was one of those things where it was just like the level went up somehow. You could just feel it. It was wild.
Yeah. Well, yeah, his piano, he's a real Western. He could do the Western swing and everything. But he had just a real. I think piano definitely was an amazing instrument for him. He had a real, fervor and really understood it. He could make it cook, so to speak. But the mandolin too. So
you and James sort of reconnected in the '90s, then.
Well, we did the Two Pictures record, and we kept playing and doing some gigs, and actually Tom and James and I did a few little tours. But again, Tom, the real problem, as you may be able to figure out if you talk to me long enough, none of us were driven to be organized or to get gigs or to make any money.
Right.
That's not a great combination. Three guys on the same page, and it's a bad page.
It's not uncommon, though.
Not uncommon. We love playing music, but we didn't have a lot of gigs, and we weren't driven to try to get more gigs.
Do you have any recordings of that? Any of those trios?
We did try to. We pitched one. We did with Murfreesboro, Tennessee, the East Tennessee East Tennessee University, or I forget what they had a. What's the fellow's name? Bruce Nemiroff was there, and he offered to James if we ever need to do recording, we're going to try to pitch a record to Rounder back then. And so we actually go in. It's kind of funny. I won't go too long with this, but we go to the studio, and so he said, "Oh yeah, free studio time, all you need." We didn't realize it was going to be really early in the mornings, really the time he was offering us. So I mean, like it's 8 o'clock in the morning, and James on the fiddle, doing a slow. It's like, and we kind of said, "I don't know if it's going to work." But we did a bunch of recordings for that and made a little project. Pitched it to Rounder, but they declined, and I think it was pretty good stuff, really. But I hadn't gone back and listened to that.
I'd love to hear it.
I'll have to see if I still have it somewhere. Probably be a cassette or who knows what, but I'll see if I can track that down. Yeah. But we did some nice stuff. We do had a nice arrangement of the Buffalo Skinners. Got Woody Guthrie and different people. Had a real nice, pretty arrangement of that with some interesting guitar and. Nice. And we did some polkas. We did a little bit of everything like James always does, and Tom too.
And throughout all of this, you've been writing songs. We haven't really talked about that, but
yeah, well, from the Muscle Shoals influence early on, Mac McAnally was a big influence because he wrote some just amazing songs and very clever with lyrics and those studio guys. A guy named Pierce Pettis, you may know Pierce Pettis. You ever heard of Pierce Pettis?
I have not. No.
Well, he was a contract. A lot of those studios would have their writers. They sign a writer to 5-year contracts because they wanted to have an archive of stuff to pitch to the people coming in, right? The singer, the artists. And anyway, Pierce was an amazing songwriter, and I'd play on some demos for folks like that, and just hear he was one of those gigging songwriter. I mean, he was played solo all the time. He could do harmonic. He did a lot of open tunings, but just a real driven good commercial songwriter. He could crank out a song for somebody else too. I never have tried to do that so much, but I appreciated how they treated it like a craft. They really treat it like an art. I mean, they didn't they didn't think some people think a songwriter is just he'll be in the gutter next week, maybe, maybe he'll make it, survive. But they really, and of course they got a salary, so that's why they took those jobs. They didn't pan out good sometimes for them.
Is your process, are you the type of person who gets up and tries to write every day, or are you more, do you wait for the inspiration? How would you describe, I mean, I know it's hard to describe your process because it probably changes, but if you had to?
I think, well, I'm always looking for, I try to keep my eyes open, and I try to stay sort of positive that I'm going to get ideas incessantly. I do expect, I think if you expect to be creative long enough, you become creative. And I did make a sort of I remember many years ago, just kind of sort of a mindful decision, I should say, I'm going to be a songwriter. I'm going to start writing songs. I just sort of made that, maybe it was much later than the Muscle Shoals, but I just, I'd always dabbled with it, but I said, I'm going to decide right here now, I'm going to write songs and be a songwriter as one aspect of what I do. Mm-hmm. And that was a big turning point for me, I think. Not that I've had a lot of success commercially, but I had some, but I think my songs have gotten better and better as a result, because I treated it more like an art form. What more could you ask for? Yeah, I think it worked. It's a good, and I think anybody can kind of make a decision, whatever it is, their environment, pottery or anything. Say, what, I'm going to be a potter, and you start really, it changes the aesthetic or something. I think a little bit. I always tell people when they first start taking lessons that the only way you can fail at music is if you quit. If you don't quit, you're going to succeed on some level, and it's
probably not going to be financial, but it's going to be a success on some level. As long as you don't quit, you're going to get better and better, and something will happen for you. It's going to be good.
Yeah. Sure, and there's so many different levels, as far as just songwriting or anything. You can write a great song with one chord. I had John Lilly, who's a friend of ours from West Virginia, good songwriter. He may write a song every day. He's really driven to crank out the songs. And at a camp years ago in Dahlonega, Georgia, I said, John, I got a good idea for a song, and I knew he would write the song. Right, when you see a guy like him, I knew it was going to happen. I said, it's just you play one chord the whole song. And the song title is "I Ain't Ever Gonna Change." And so he did, and he wrote that song. And it turned into a nice song.
That's great.
So that was an idea. So the main thing about having ideas is to try to document them right away, because you're not going to remember them when you think you will. Like
Do
whatever.
You write them down or record them on your phone, or
the phone's been very handy. The voice memos, I've got hundreds of voice memos. I got to go back. Unfortunately, you do have to go back.
Yes, I know.
And you have to label them. I was not good at cassettes. I'm trying to be better at voice memo. Say, Mando idea with and I kind of like making up a title right then and there, because it puts a reference point on it. Mm-hmm. Whatever the title may be. It could be "This Needs a Title Really Bad," and that could be the song. So anyway, I don't know, but constant. What's the word? I just kind of reinforce that there's a lot of ideas out there, and they're not that hard to grasp if you just pay attention a little bit.
And what about you've spent so much time backing up fiddle players? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, that's a real underappreciated art form, I think, for one thing, and I think. When people really, because I don't have anything against people that just haven't ever thought about it, but the bluegrass world, some of those, some of the guitar players, they're great guitar players. They kind of look at the old time world and think, well, that's just D, I think, that's just D, ain't it? I mean, I've heard that said actually as a literal statement. That's the old time. That's just D, ain't it? I mean, really, they were honest.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit under the accurate statement there. But I think the main thing is, and I have a hard time. I get carried away. I tend to do too much in my songwriting, I think, too. I make it a little too intricate, and I just can't help myself. And a lot of that came from just sort of playing the melody for myself so I could remember the melody.
Right. So
I do that a lot, and I never have gotten out of that hardly. I kind of do it still.
Like when you're backing a fiddle up, you mean?
No, when I'm playing. But I do.
Right.
That's helped me as far as if I do want to play some melody with the fiddler, I've been very melody-centric for a long time.
Well, it seems like you've got, from listening to your playing, you've got... you an uncommon balance between when you can sort of slide the melody in within your rhythm playing pretty well. And I try.
Well, I've focused on that, and the mandolin the same thing, where I can kind of go out of the rhythm, maybe a little bit of melody, a little bit of harmony, and back and forth. Try to travel those 2 or 3 worlds: the rhythm, the melody, the harmony, and the anything goes. Kind of 4 different worlds, I think. Riley Puckett was the anything goes, I think, mostly, which he did very well. But I think what I have been striving for a long time is just to be very supportive, and but also taking the backup as a very serious. If you take away the fiddle, the backup would sound very musical, even without the fiddle.
Right.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's sort of been my focus.
Right. Interesting.
And I have had fiddlers, I get to doing too much, and they'll let you know. A fiddler will let you know if you're taking away their glory. So I'm a little guilty of that. Sometimes I get carried away and start doing too much. So I got to remind myself often, you can do a lot less and it's still going to be good.
Right. I remember running into, when I was young in my early 20s, watching Nancy Blake give a workshop at Augusta, and she was talking about bass lines and just how just it was really it had a lot of impact on me. She was just talking about how much thought she gives into every bass line, even though it might seem simple. She's just like always, making it say something and not just just a repetitive thing. And it's not bad if it just goes back and forth, but you want to always be thinking and have some intention, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, I love her cello. When she played the cello like a bass, she did some beautiful lines. And that's one thing about that Norman and Nancy and James. They took it, like I say, they were very cognizant of trying to make things. They had sort of almost a chamber music approach to Oldtime. Which was very almost like they were creating this composition out of the whole texture and everything. but also having a lot of fun with it too, and being very spontaneous at the same time. So that was and that's not so chamber music like, that's the spontaneity and anything goes. And one thing about Norman playing the mandolin with him is if you didn't know his material, which he had a lot of tunes, he just spring Bristol in the Bottle, which was on his first record, or some tune I never had even heard or listened to, and you have to take a mandolin break all of a sudden, and if you played a bad break, the way he would handle that, he'd say, "Oh, take it again." He'd let you just take another bad break, and then the next time you had to play it, you would know that tune. He'd make you do two bad breaks in a row.
Have you been? You're a very well-regarded teacher. I've heard great things about your teaching from people who have taken your workshops.
That's nice.
Have you done? Have you always taught? Were you like through all these years that we've talked about? Were you taking on the odd occasional student here and there, or is this sort of when did you start doing workshops and all that type of thing?
Well, really that 1995, the first camp that I went to with James was at Port Townsend Festival of American Fiddle Tunes. And that's when I'd done a little bit of lessons, individual before that, but that's when I first realized this whole world existed I had no clue about, this world of music camps and group lessons. And so that really opened my eyes. And I started having to teach, at those camps, first of all. So that really makes you start thinking about learning what you're doing and being able to describe it and relay it to someone else, which is, some people, are good at that right off the bat, but it's a learned process for most, and me especially. I learned that, and I'm still learning, because I tend to throw too much at people still. I'm still trying to back off, sort of like my playing, do a little less and let them really grasp that. So I'm talking to myself here right now.
Do a
little less, let them grasp it and enjoy it, rather than giving them 5 things to grasp at once and slide down the rope.
Yeah. So has your teaching influenced your playing? Or you may have just answered that in a way.
Oh, well, I think so, because I really do. Again, and I did hang out with some old fiddlers and all, but my approach never was to go, hang out with an old fiddler. I mean, I love a lot of old musicians and fiddlers and mandolin players, but rather than going and I haven't really gone and absorbed one player's, style, which is a great thing. I admire people that do that, but I've really been inspired just by trying to get better on the instrument. And then archive recordings, and James actually learns a lot out of old 78 recordings and books, tune books. So I really became enamored of tune books along with James back in the early 80s.
Which is very unique, I think, for this style of music. Most players aren't getting their... The other player that I can think of in the past 20 years who in the old-time world who was getting a lot of tunes out of books is Hartford was doing that, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
But that's not a common thing, and I think it makes you guys obviously your repertoires it helps to make it unique. I think
James would really glean. I mean, he had a real knack, but he went through like there's a Cole's 1,000 Fiddle Tunes book, which is kind of a classic. Mel Bay reissued it, but I found his daughter's room. He would go through and write. He wrote all those tunes, 1,000 of them by pencil, more than once. And I guess that helped him assimilate the tunes. He could play, and he loved going through those books. And they have different composers. It'd be like Zeke Backus, has the name of a composer of the tune. He would find his favorite composer out of the 1,000 tunes and learn all those tunes. Zeke Backus was one of them. So if you're looking at Cole's Fiddle Tunes, those would probably be good. Zeke Backus.
Interesting.
So that's pretty impressive. But that got me just appreciating. But the art there was him really trying all of them. And he's developing his technique more and more. But he also really gleaned the gems out of there, with a lot of time. And I think he has that's one of his real talents, I think, too.
I think so, too. I've definitely benefited from all his hard work.
He's played
a lot of his tunes. I think a lot of us are in debt for those albums. And then after that, obviously, you and Aaron have been playing together for about 10...
Oh, at least 10 years. We've been living here in Galax for over 12 years, so it's unbelievable. Yeah, so a long time, and her whole aesthetic with the West Virginia, Kentucky tunes. I love those tunes, as well, and so that was nice and Doc Roberts, and of course Melvin Wine. Of course, she plays a lot of Melvin Wine, and I love those are great tunes. And she's
did she? You must have been familiar with them on some level, but maybe your familiarity had to get stepped up a little bit when you guys started playing together?
I was more familiar with the Kentucky tunes than the West Virginia players at the time. And so it's an ongoing adventure. But Erin's really good at, again, she's got a little bit of Tom Jackson, motivation. She gets an idea and she kind of does it, which is very inspiring to me. and I'm trying to soak that up a little bit.
Good.
Like I'd love to do a mandolin book one day, and I instead of just talking about it, Tom or Aaron would go ahead and just, here's the first page, okay, I'm on my way. That's
right.
And that makes me think of Twyla Tharp. One thing that I try to remind myself, she's a dance choreographer and stuff, and she would do, when she had any project, she would get a box. There's a nice book about the art of creativity or something, I forget the name, but she would get a box and put the name of the project on it, and just start putting everything that would pertain to that in that box, and that's the project starting to happen.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so maybe my mandolin book, I need to get my box started.
So you don't have the box yet.
That's terrible. Yeah, this may be the start of my box.
Well, that's great. What are you and Aaron doing to keep busy during COVID times these days? Are you working on a new album or anything?
Well, we're actually doing, like I said, we've been doing these online classes. Aaron had about 3 fiddle classes, and they're going to reoccur because he's had a real good turnout. And I've done 1 guitar class, which is very nice, and I'll probably do another one of those, and maybe a banjo or mandolin class. So we're doing that. I mean, it's a learning curve. The technology is getting better and better. The more you do it, it's amazing. We've actually taken an Irish fiddle class, and that's really helpful to take a class from somebody that's kind of got that down and see how they do that. So we took a little Irish fiddle class from Randall Bays, which has been very, very enlightening and fun.
Very cool.
And we also do this Patreon. We have a little Patreon. A lot of musicians are doing that. I don't know. I'm sure some folks. You may be doing that. I'm not
sure. We'll put a link up to that in the things.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. I could do this for another hour, but we should probably.
No, that's fine. You got some good stuff in there somewhere, I hope.
I'm sure we did. No, it was wonderful to talk to you, and hopefully we'll see each other face to face next summer in BC, and we'll be able to do this.
I'm sure we will. Yeah, I look forward to it, and I'll keep soaking up the ideas and maybe making my mandolin box.
All right. Thanks so much, Carl.
All right. Take care, Chris. Thank you. See you.
All right.